Welcome to the Grow Renaissance podcast. Let's nourish the world.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Pasture Prime Time, a Grow Renaissance podcast series. Today, we're going to be talking about people, ideas, innovations that are shaping agriculture, as we always do on this podcast. And joining us is a man who spent 35 years in the field as an agronomist, building real knowledge from the ground up. He's the owner of Agua Naturalia in Mexico, co-founder of Archangel Agriculture, which we'll get to hear a little bit more about, and has served on boards of more than 20 agriculture-focused committees. And together with his wife, Anna, they run an orphanage in Mexico. This is a life built on service, on stewardship, on serious commitment to agriculture. So let's get right into it. Adrian, what first pulled you into this work, and why do you keep fighting all these years in agriculture so that we can continue to feed the world?
Hello, Amanda. Hello, Neil. Thank you
morning.
for having me. Well, I guess that this journey started because we wanted to contribute and do a change. Maybe the part that you don't know about me is that I attended law school because I wanted to save the world first. And I practiced while I was studying. I was in a couple of law firms, and I did criminal law, I did corporate law, family law. And then after 3 years, I saw that the system wouldn't change through that. And I went into a personal journey. I ended up studying agronomy. And since the first day I attended college and studying agronomy, I realized that we needed to do something. I mean, if everybody would put just their own little grain into the bucket, I think that we would fill it up pretty fast. So I started agronomy, plant science engineer, and since day one, I wanted to find a way to make things more natural. I've always been amused by the way nature does things, and I started, reading a lot about biomimicry. And one thought stayed in my mind since day one is, how does nature does things, and how can we replicate what nature does?
I love it. I love it.
And then on the other side, we have all this commercial agriculture, a lot of big companies with a lot of different economic interests selling stuff that, it's not really good stuff for the ecosystem, but it would make growers profitable, kind of, not really. In the long term, wouldn't. And so, we started exploring, 40 years ago, more or less. Organics, and I try to implement everything about minimum tillage or no tillage, and trying to understand the soil ecosystems. And one thing led me to the other one. And like you mentioned, I just feel my wife and I and my kids, we just feel that it's a change of You mentioned a couple of the things that I do. Basically, it's changing the way you think. Instead of serving the self, it's service to others.
Mm-hmm.
And if we all contribute just a little bit with that way of thinking, and we take that into action, I think that we can turn things around and have a much better world. And in agriculture, I started. Like I said, exploring minimal tillage and organics, working with compost at that time, and trying to understand the way the ecology in the soil works. Like one of the fathers of organic movement said, it's more interesting what goes on in the soil, than what goes on top of the soil.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that now we've reached a point where there are many tools. People have experienced a lot of different approaches the last 40 years, all the way from small farmers to the big companies. And they realized that there are many, many different approaches that could make them profitable and at the same time do not hurt the ecosystem or the world. So I guess today, what it's in the grower's mind, because like you said, I mean, I've been a grower myself. It's not about, attaining the highest yields possible. It's how can I be profitable and how can I make my resources last, and not only last, improve them.
Mhm.
Improve the soil, improve the ecosystem, produce healthier.
11 o'clock.
Say
That was my
again?
computer. I'm sorry. My computer just let me know that it's 11 o'clock in Eastern time. So have that.
Yeah, so I guess it's about being profitable in a rational way. It's not
Right.
about how much money I can make, and if I can make more money, what would it take to increase my return on investment? No, I don't think that's the case anymore. Growers all over the world are suffering a lot, and they are being squeezed to the point where we shouldn't do that. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
people that produce our food.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think that kind of mindset that we've had for so long of just the profit, profit, profit side of things has really kind of led us up to this pinch point, the pain point of how do we continue to produce at that level when we have degraded the soils and ignored the ecosystems and those important factors. It's really kind of put us in that interesting place that we're at today. It's time for that change.
Exactly. And so I guess that the biggest challenge that I've detected, I've been working on is how can we bridge the old conventional system into a modern, scientific, but respectful the environment,
Yeah.
nature. How can we bridge the old ways, with what we want to do in the future? And I
Yeah.
guess that's the big question. How can growers transition from the old ways into the new agriculture and survive that? And,
Yeah.
and be able to make a profit, to have a decent standard of living, and at the same
Hmm.
time, improve what the earth has given us. I mean, improve the soils,
Yeah.
rivers, and be able to capture more water in our lands and improve the ecosystem, in the soil and on top of the soil.
Yeah.
That,
Because
that
I
that's
think you'd
what I
agree with. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that I'd love your opinion on this. I think you both would have something to say about it. A lot of farms today are almost on life support. And you can't just go and pull that cord and just remove all the things that they've been doing. Because the way that I've always described this, I've been in agriculture for some years now myself. It's the products that we're using are almost like whipping these plants into action and forcing them to do things, forcing them to produce. And if you just took that away, these poor plants and the poor soil is so exhausted, it wouldn't have the energy. So that transition is going to be crucial. You can't just take all the things away that are currently being used and expect abundance, right? And so, how do you transition that over smoothly, right? How do you cross that bridge?
Adrian, you said a lot of things that brought a lot of smiles to my face. One, don't chase the yield. That's a message that I talk about all the time. Two, thinking about hydrology, so the water systems in our agriculture, I think it's missed. We talk about the soil, we talk about plants, we talk about nutrients, and we often forget about water, unless there's a flood. But the importance of hydrology and really the water systems that shore up our agriculture are very, very important. And then, as you're talking about, it's not all about the highest yield and return for dollar. It's really about what we can do in terms of land maximization and being able to scratch a living. But the key factor there that I think you're highlighting is actually an ethos over at Grow, which is bridging tradition with technology. And that's how we're going to get to that next level, right? We can't forget about the basic fundamentals of how to grow and raise food, but we can bridge that with newer technologies. And it really is not removing the human component from the systems that we've created and relying solely on technology. It's a mirror or a marriage that needs to happen. And so I love all of that. I'm very curious, just given our current geopolitical system right now, there's a lot of stressors this spring around fertility. Being an agronomist yourself, you're probably hearing a lot about it from producers. It's a talk of the town. In North America, there's a lot of chat around, are we even able to put seed in the ground this year if we don't have a fertility program because of the geopolitical issues? And I actually love it because it's actually forcing people to think differently about how they are going to start their season off, right? But I'd love your opinion. I'd love your take on some of the conversations around typical fertility programs and what this opportunity opens up for us to think differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that you're right on the spot. The fertility, it's the key. In order to have fertility, we need to take into consideration several factors that have to do with the soil, the organic matter, the microorganisms, and blah, blah, blah. Basically, I think that, I mean, like I said, many factors, but let's focus on nitrogen, for example. 95% of the grains that we produce in the world that feed the world, corn, wheat, rice, the most important ones, they demand a lot of nitrogen, especially corn. So how do we produce, acceptable yields that would, make everything work with a system where we don't want to continue to have this dependency on chemical fertilizers, but sometimes all those microorganisms that are fixating nitrogen sometimes are not enough. So I guess that what I've seen that it's working, it's kind of a mixture. I mean, I think that it's like a building. I think that the foundations of the building must be on the soil, must be on the microorganisms diversity and all the necessary elements they need to prosper. And that means that we will not be turning the soils around. We will try to not disrupt the soil as much. We'll try to have that to the minimum. And that will help us a lot because there's going to be a lot of microorganisms working and fixating nitrogen. But in many cases, that will not be enough. And I think that there we can rely on technological solutions where we can use some types of biotic fertilizers or even chemical fertilizers that are not as aggressive as the ones that we all know, and also support the plant nutrition in a foliar way. And I think that products like bio-stimulants, nanotechnology, certain ways of producing nitrogen-based fertilizers that are out there right now with different companies and different technologies, I think a combination of the microorganisms and these new type of technologies, I think that they can really help us in achieve reasonable yields in nitrogen-hungry crops like corn. I think that it's not something that will be accomplished really fast, but I think it could be accomplished not like in the past that everybody would think that in order to transition to that point, it will take 5 years. I don't think so. I think that we got technologies right now, like I said, certain types of natural and chemical fertilizers that are applied into the soil and in a foliar way that could make that trick. I really do.
Yeah, I
And
really
I don't
agree
know
with
how
you.
much you. Sorry, go ahead,
Go ahead,
Neil.
Amanda. No,
I was going to
I was just going
say,
to say, Adrian, I really agree with you in terms of the time frames that we think about are actually fairly short because of the technology in our knowledge base right now. It's just us making that first leap, right? Taking that first opportunity. Conversations I'm having, around we're not going to have enough nitrogen, in regular fertility plants, which is forcing us to think about the nano solutions, the biostimulant solutions, but also protecting the nitrogen that we do put down, so stabilizers. And so we get into a real agronomic, but I continue to come back to one basic, and this is my segue to get back into hydrology, which is WEOC, water extractable organic carbon, and that being the key indicator for what we can actually do without in our fertility programs and where we can go, because there's so much that WEOC can give us as an indicator from an agronomic standpoint that really can allow us to see different opportunities that regular soil testing won't do, and variable rate plan misses, and in as much as I like Haney tests and SAP, so if we don't understand the WEOC at this early stage, we start to miss some of the fundamentals of making those first leaps in the change. So mirror tradition or science with technology. We come back to that same
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amanda, just before I know you have a question on the tip of your tongue there, and I cut you off, but
I know.
Adrian, you actually spun up a business called Archangel, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that and have you share what Archangel Agriculture is all about, because I've been talking about it into the grow community, but it's never better than to hear it directly from the founder.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, well, our Changeable Agriculture, it's a company that my partners and I, Amanda, right here,
One of them.
yeah, and Joe Petty, we formed our Changeable Agriculture because we think that we got the elements and specifically the technology that could really help in bridging what we've been talking about. The old ways and the old way of doing farming and producing and transition that into a more natural and rational way of producing crops. Our Changeable Agriculture is a company that has many projects at the moment, but basically the one that everything is founded on, it's a nanotechnology biostimulant. It's a natural nanotechnology biostimulant made out of vegetable oils that have been processed with nanotechnologies. It's non-mutagenic, it's non-carcinogenous, and has these amazing properties of boosting any type of fertilizer, and also shows an amazing property of stimulating the plant
Mhm.
in many of the physiological things that the plant is performing as the plant grows and starts the cycle all the way to fruiting or whatever is the group you're talking about. So our digital agriculture is proposing a way of reducing the amounts of fertilizers that you're using. And because of the solution that we have, this nanotechnology solution, biostimulant, because it's very interesting. Nanotechnology, there's still a long way to go. But we got this specific type of molecule. I'm going to get a little bit scientific over here. That our particle size, it's 5 nanometers. That's 1 millionth. 1 nanometer is 1 millionth of a millimeter. So the formulation that we have has the ability of chelate, of bond into different types of molecules and cations and anions, meaning that even that it's not a dipolar type of molecule, it has the capacity of chelating or bonding with positively or negatively charged molecules and introducing them into the plant at a very amazing fast rate without the plant using energy to get it inside. So it can get the products all the way into the cell wall inside of the plant. So I think it's an amazing tool. Like there are many other tools out there, but this is a very unique tool that we found that could really help the farmers reduce the amounts of fertilizers that they're using. Okay, and at the same time increase the metabolism of the plant,
Mhm.
very efficient way with a lot of energy savings for the plant. And you see that, reflected in the more resistant crop against biotic stress or abiotic stress or any kinds of threats. At the same time, we've seen the very interesting improvements in yields and also in nutrient content inside of
Mhm.
the plant and the fruit. So I think this is a very useful tool, and we have a lot of hopes that once the growers understand and start using the product, they will see that this is one of the tools that are out there that can really help them transition into different type of farm.
Yeah. And if I can add one thing onto that, one other really, actually, two more really additional interesting aspects of that product. One is that it can basically nano size whatever you mix it with. So if you're taking nitrogen and you mix it with this biostimulant, our product breaks that nitrogen down to the nanoscale. And if it's 5 nanometers, a billionth of a meter, we are really talking about sub nano. They say anything really from 10, 10 up would be nano, but it's just an interesting thing. So you can use less nitrogen by mixing it with this and use this as a foliar spray to get the nitrogen right into the plant. Another thing that it does, which is pretty phenomenal, it's not a pesticide. However, it does degrade waxy substances. And as we know, for insects, their joints, their arms, their wings, their things is waxy. And so it actually can degrade that so they can't walk or climb or fly. So it's a really nice way to organically, naturally handle the pests on the side of things. So that is just a perfect example of, nature, what it needs, and not disrupting nature with harsh chemicals and bringing in that technology. So we're pretty excited about that. And Adrian, I don't know how much you can share. I know you have some amazing inventions and things that you're also working on. I don't know if there's anything you can mention. If not, that's okay too. I know that you've got always some really wild and amazing things in development. Is there anything else that you'd like to share on any of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all know what's going on out there in terms of robotics. So we are working on multi-platform robot for agriculture that can serve as a sprayer and also as a platform for harvesting and some other stuff, or carrying product from the fields to the packing house or to the trucks. And we have incorporated other technologies like plant stimulation through frequencies, which is something that not many people are aware of. There's a lot of research being done out there that certain frequencies stimulate the plants as well. And there are technologies that we're incorporating in there where those frequencies can be imprinted in the water. And once you spray that water or you take that water through the irrigation system and even through the soil, the plant is able to absorb those frequencies and get stimulated. So that's one of them. Then we got another project going on for aerial fumigation that is not a drone, but it's not a plane or a helicopter. Let's call it, I don't know how many people are familiar with this, but I don't know how to say it in English. Well, it's called a gyrocopter. I don't know if some people know about that, but it's a different type of aircraft that does not produce a huge turbulence to the ground. It's got mobile wings, like a helicopter, but its technology is different and it's much cheaper to spray long surfaces, areas of crops at a very low cost. So we're working on those kind of things, and also we are in contact with different companies that have developed new ways of extracting nitrogen out of the air. And instead of going through the Haber-Bosch cycle of ammonia producing using natural gas and getting nitrogen fertilizers, and you'll find those huge complexes that are hundreds of millions of investment. These are on-site cells that can produce nitrogen fertilizers using a different technology, and this kind of thing. So we're trying to bring all these different tools to the growers and work with them in designing different types of protocols. And I think that so far they're working. People are excited about this, and they see their soils improving and having decent yields, and most important, making a profit.
I love it. I love it. Adrian, I've really appreciated you sharing all of that and all the things that you're doing for agriculture, and specifically hearing about Archangel. As we think about coming to the close of this conversation and sharing conversation, I'd love to get your perspective on what you think is working well in agriculture, because we talk a lot about things that aren't working well and what we need to fix and improve. But as a nice way to close out this podcast, what's going well in your opinion? What's working?
What I see that is really working, it's what people like Gabe Brown are doing with regenerative agriculture. That's really working. That's a model that is really working, where you can be producing protein in a very efficient way with really amazing numbers, and at the same time you're improving your soils, and you are increasing the water holding capacity of those soils. And I think that's very, very important, because remember, like I said, corn, wheat, and rice are the grains that are feeding the world. And in the case of corn and wheat, close to 90%, over 90% of them are being produced with the water that comes from the sky, with rainwater. So the way things are right now in the world, with all these climate patterns changing, we have our production systems, in a very risky situation. So we have to pay a lot of attention to regenerative agriculture, because it's like an insurance. It's the only way we could really have an opportunity if the climate patterns change and we don't get the same rain that we've been getting. The only ones that are going to be able to produce food are the people that are doing those type of models. So I think that regenerative agriculture is not only producing a very healthy food, very healthy protein. I mean, eggs and poultry and pigs and beef and sheep and goat. But they are working in having this humidity of water reservoir that could really help us if we end up facing a situation like that.
Yeah, I love that, Adrian, and I'm a big champion and advocate for regenerative. So, that's a great way to sort of bring together, the technology and things that you're working on, Archangel and, the nano, very interesting technology that you have. And really, let's pay attention to the things that are working, the things that seem a little bit foreign to some people and a concept that's challenged us, but it's out there and it's been around. So I really appreciate you taking the time, Adrian. I know it's early, your time down in Mexico. I'm hoping this is the first of many conversations that we'll have as you continue to collaborate. And of course, because Amanda's working with you on Archangel and she's part of the Grow ecosystem. So thank you so much. When this gets recorded, we'll put some information down below here if anyone wants to reach out to Adrian, potentially is in Mexico or anywhere in our network, some contact information. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day as we end this week in March 2026, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Pasture Prime Time.
Sounds great.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure, and I'm sure that this is the first one of many other talks and collaborations that we will have. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I'm sure Adrian would be happy to do any kinds of connections or consultations. He loves to help. He's one of my favorite humans.
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining us today,
Absolutely.
Adrian.
My pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.